And welcome back. This is ballerscuba with more update videos. In case you missed it, I either have one or two videos already up talking about the channel, what's coming up in the immediate future, what is kind of going on with all the different Let's Plays and stuff like that. We are not going to talk about that today. Instead, today in this video, we're going to talk about what has been going on. Why there was a delay in videos, why there was a slowdown, why there was a full stoppage of videos for a couple months, I believe, and what's been going on in my personal life that led to all that to happen. So let's talk about those. We'll start, just for the record, this is going to be a long story. There's a lot that happened. And it's going to be relatively detailed. There's going to be math involved. At least in my head, there's going to be math involved. I don't know if I'm going to dish it out to you guys, though. I might just keep it all in my head. So strap yourselves in if you guys want to hear all this. Let's start with basically that my grandmother died in 2016, November 2016. So 2.5 years ago, it seems like. That's kind of where the story starts. I know it's not the greatest start for the story, but that kind of set all these wheels in motion that led to this point. So we will start there. When my grandmother died, her estate and my grandfather's estate, because my grandfather had died years before, passed down to my mother and my uncle. And that there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. The issue was the house, because my uncle kind of wanted the money from the house instead of a half share of the house, which was fine. So what ended up happening, because the only way we could make the math work, was to get a mortgage for half of the house, pay that to my uncle, and then me and my mother would own a share of the house itself. Between the two of us, we would own that. So basically, since it took a while to get everything sorted, but from like July 2017, it took, like I said, it took a long time, somewhere around there. I've been paying like half a mortgage on a house. So when that started, that's when kind of like the financial stuff in my life started kind of like taking over, where I started really having to think about money a little bit more, because I was suddenly paying for a mortgage on a home that I was not anticipating doing. But at the end of the day, a mortgage that was costing me like a quarter of what it should, for a quarter of that house, which was basically the math that it ended up being, that worked out pretty well in my favor, I thought, long term. So long term, I still think that is the good thing out of that happened to me. But in the short term, I suddenly had, a lot more bills to pay that I wasn't anticipating paying. It was around that time that I started. Well, yeah, it was around that time that I started dating Hannah. And once I started dating Hannah, I kind of wanted out of the house. Because I had been taking care of my grandma for like 7 years, something like that. And I thought it was time for me to kind of move on. And the best way that I thought to move on was to get out of the house. And Hannah had always wanted to move to Portland. So she convinced me to go on vacation up here to Portland, and I absolutely fell in love with it too. So my goal shifted from trying to pay off the mortgage of that house to trying to find a place in Portland, and kind of dealing with the house otherwise. I had always kind of thought that I was going to move out of the house, but the furthest that I was thinking was South Orange County. So like from Anaheim to like Irvine, something like that, which is like 20 minutes away, because I thought it was pretty down there. Then I came up to Portland. I'm like, wait, no, it's prettier up here. It's like so much prettier. So the goal kind of shifted to moving to Portland, and we decided to do that in probably around April or May 2018. So a little bit over a year ago, we had decided, okay, we're going to try to figure out how we can move to Portland. So what ended up happening was we decided, when I say we, this time I mean my mother and me, decided to try to hold on to the house and rent it out. We thought that in the long run, renting out the house would be a better financial investment for us than trying to sell it and take the lump sum of money up front. I still agree with that, but there's a lot of problems that come with that we'll get into. So that became the goal, was to get the house ready to be rented, start renting it out. She takes a share of the rent income, I take a share of the rent income, and then our property managers take a share of the rent income. And then, of course, the mortgage gets paid off through the rent income. So a lot of that is kind of relying on the rent income, which is fine if it's rented. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So we set a date. Hannah and I set a date for when we were going to move, and that was May 27th? No, okay, May 27th was Memorial Day, and we ended up moving on the 1st, June 1st, which was the Friday. But starting on May 27th, that was when everything had to stop and everything had to be packed so that we could go. So that was the date that we had decided on. We had to kind of set a date. It wasn't necessarily the best date, but it was the one that worked for us overall. I say that it's not necessarily the best date because rent premiums are a little bit higher in summer typically than they are, in the middle of winter and stuff like that. So it wasn't the best financially for us, but it was the one that worked, and it was the one we stuck with. So then began the process of trying to clear out the house. That was the next big thing. So we got the property manager. We set a date. We now needed to start clearing out the house of all the stuff. And this became a huge problem. I mean, this was big. I should also mention that around this time, the city started doing construction on the streets around us. So there was also that going on. I don't entirely know what they did other than put like a resurface on it, just a new surface right on top. But it took them like 4 months to do it. And that was in the residential area around our house. Like, it was a big pain for us for a long time. They like cut us off from our driveway several times. I remember this was around Election Day because they actually took away our ability to get out of our own driveway on Election Day. And I was thinking, I'm like, wait, isn't this illegal? Don't you have to allow me out to vote? Isn't that some sort of requirement? But they eventually let us out, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But they were so bad at their job. I thought for a long time that they were trying to fix the gutter, because the gutter didn't drain very well. So anytime it rained, there'd just be puddles all over the gutter in the whole section. But they never touched the gutter. They stripped the street right next to the gutter, probably about a good 2-3 feet down, and a good 3-4 inches across, and then filled it back up. I have no idea what they were doing or why, but they had been doing it for 4 months. So that was also kind of a hassle. So we needed to figure out, we needed to figure out a way to clear the house, right? We have all this stuff. My grandparents are the original owners of the house when it was built in 55. So there's a lot of stuff in that house that we needed out. There's also a lot of issues with the house. We'll get more into that later. But we needed to figure out how to clear the house of all this stuff. We had sofas, we had furniture, we had clothes, we had little knickknacks. We had so much in there that needed to go that we felt we couldn't handle it ourselves. So My mother had done an estate sale once with a friend, and it worked out pretty well. So she asked that friend again, hey, can we set up an estate sale with you to get rid of all of this furniture and all that kind of stuff. And the friend this time said, no, that's actually too big of a project for me, but you can talk to my boss about it, or her friend about it. I'm not entirely sure about the details, but there was somebody that was, better at it, a higher up of some sort, that was better at it. So we were going to sign up with her. I don't know her last name, so I'll go ahead and tell you that I knew her as Mary. That was who it was. It was Mary. So we had to figure out a date to do it. What we ended up deciding was that the best thing to do was to do kind of everything at once. So we kind of established a date with the estate sale while Hannah and I were on vacation, so to speak, in Portland, which we had decided to do starting on April 27th. Let me check a calendar here. April 27th through May 10th. We were going to be in Portland. The purpose of Hannah and I being in Portland was to find an apartment and to find jobs. That was it. We can call it a vacation. You could if you wanted to, but really it was in order to find a place to live and a place to work. So, we can live here. That was the main idea. So we decided that the best time for them to do construction was to be when we weren't in the house, so that there was as little in their way as possible. And the construction, did I mention the construction? I don't think I did. Like I said, there was a lot of work that needed to be done on the house. It'd been from the 50s. We talked to the property managers. They suggested that we get some construction done. The construction was to remove this brown shag carpet that pretty much takes over the entire house. I think you guys saw a glimpse of that in one of the vlog videos. The brown shag carpet goes literally all the way through like 80% of the house. It's not in the bathroom, it's not in the kitchen, and it's not in kind of the family room area, but it's everywhere else. And it has been there since like the 70s or so. So that needed to go. We also needed them to kind of repaint all the walls. The problem with that is that we had wallpaper that needed to be removed. And the wallpaper removal is definitely the hardest part. Because it was dual layered and it had been there for so long, it was starting to peel everywhere. So it needed to go. And it was going to be just painted like white or something. After that, we also needed to do construction on the master bathroom, which was Hannah and my bathroom. It just needed a complete facelift. It still had linoleum floors. A shower that didn't quite work right. Still had some mobility stuff from when my grandma was there. It needed to go. It needed to be kind of redone with a full facelift. So those were the main three projects. And we had talked to the property managers and they said, sure, while you guys are gone, we can take care of that. All right, sounds good. So while Hannah and I are searching for apartments and and jobs. There we go. The idea was to take Ruby to Hannah's parents' house. They live in Monterey, right? That's why we were always going up to Monterey. We were going to drive up to Monterey, fly out of San Jose into Portland, dropping Ruby off in Monterey. So it was just going to be my mom at the house while construction was going on and while the estate sale was going on. I should also mention around this time, I started needing to work more. I had to work a lot more. The problem was that I have been doing the jobs that I had been doing for so long that it had never occurred to anybody else at my job to learn how to do my job. The main job, I had been there for 14 years. My side business, I had been at that company for 8 years. It was very bad that I was leaving for these companies. They might still go under because I left and they don't have anybody to really replace what I was doing for them. They have some idea of how to handle some of my work, but there was nobody that could have done all of my work, and that's where the issue started. So at my main job, I went from working around 30 hours a week to 50 hours a week. I was pulling 10-hour days every day to try to write an office manual to try to train the person that was going to replace me. The doctor ended up hiring somebody to replace me in March, but she couldn't actually start working until April. So he hired her and then gave her like a month, and then she came back and I had a week to train her. Meanwhile, I had just finished my office manual. I started working on that in August, and as the time got closer, I had to work on it more and more and more. I finished it while I was training her to do some other parts of my job. It ended up being over 500 pages of an office manual. I ended up writing literally everything that I had done in the office, step-by-step instructions, links, pictures. There's a lot of pictures in there to make sure that everybody knows what I'm talking about. And it wasn't just for this person that replaced me, it was for the entire office. But if you ask the rest of the office, it's not needed. They don't need it. They know what I'm doing, except they have no idea what I was doing. Absolutely none. It's bad over there. And then at the other office, which if you forgot, I think I might have mentioned it once, it's in Culver City. And I know that's not a name that stands out to people because you're not from Southern California, but Culver City is basically downtown LA. Their office happened to be right next to Sony Pictures. Like, it was right there in the heart of Los Angeles. It was only about 30 miles from where I was living in Anaheim to, let me do some math here. It was only about 30 miles from where I was living to Culver City, to their office in Culver City. 30 miles, for those of you that don't do miles, it's about 48 kilometers, right? It's not that far. It's not that bad. It took me 3 hours to get there. That's how bad traffic is. It took me 3 hours the first time I drove up, and when I came back, the first time it took me 3 hours each way. Second time it only took me 2.5. Why? I don't know. I went on the same day of the week. They were both Tuesdays. Didn't seem to be any accidents along the way. I don't know why one day was a half hour worse than the other. I don't know. But so that was a hassle. I ended up having to go to their office 3 times to try to train people how to do my job. The first person that I trained sounded like she got it, and then the next day I got a phone call saying she didn't want to do it anymore. It seemed like too much of a hassle for her to do it. The second person I went up to train, she was actually the person that I replaced 8 years ago to do this job. She didn't end up... What was the problem with that one? Oh, no, she was so slow. Oh, she was so bad. Yeah, you might notice I'm starting to get them mixed up. I'll explain why in a second. But the second time I went up, she was so slow. She watched me do it. I asked her, do you want to do it? And she said, no, I'll just watch you. Because I'm like, all right, if that's how you learn, I'll just keep showing you. The next day she called me, and while I'm on the phone with her, she's trying to do it. I'm just looking at this going, there's no way. Because I kept telling that office that I worked for them for about 15 to 20 hours a week, which was a bit of an exaggeration. I wasn't working that much for them, but that's how much I figured it would be for a normal person to get that work done. She would not have been able to do it 60 hours a week. She was that slow at what she was doing. It took us 10 minutes to get her to like log into the computer. And remember, she had been doing it before I was doing it. So in 8 years, she had forgotten all of it and she could not relearn it. It's not that complicated of a job, if I'm being honest. So that was bad. Third time I went up, I don't remember how long it took. I think it was another 2.5 hours. I just had to drop stuff off. I just basically gave them a box full of papers and said, bye. So that's how often I went to Culver City. But how often I had to train people for the Culver City office was insane. I ended up working for her for over 30 hours over the phone in 2 months, training people. I trained over 10 people to do the most basic part of my job. The most basic part of my job was considered a biller. These were people that had billed and they could not understand it. She ended up trying to get companies, individual people, Craigslist ads, didn't matter. She went through so many people. I don't know if she just constantly picked the first one on the list. That was kind of my impression, that she just went, this is the first person to respond to my Craigslist ad. We're going to hire this person. And then I talked to him on the phone and I'm like, no, you don't want to hire this person. But yeah, I trained over 10 people to do my job. But like I said, some of them were companies. And I had the office manual written. I just kind of sent it to them, and they still called and bothered me all the time to get it done. And I know 30 hours doesn't sound like much, but it's while I'm working 50 hours a week and trying to do her work too. So it started adding up. And because of that, I had to start slowing down on videos. Not only was time short, but my attitude was not in the right place. I don't want to be upset day after day after day and then try to record videos where I'm basically faking being not necessarily happy, but enthusiastic and energetic. It just wasn't a good place for me to record videos. And I don't fake anything, right? I know that's not really something that's been a topic on YouTube for a long time. It's been years since I've heard anybody being fake. It's just kind of accepted now, but I try not to exaggerate. I try not to go over the top. I basically just kind of ramp up my personality a little bit, but this is basically me. If you met me in person, I would be very similar to this. I just would be more quiet, especially when I'm meeting somebody new because I'm shy. But yeah, this is pretty much me. And if I was going to start faking it in order to try to be more entertaining, it just wouldn't have been good in the long run. So I didn't do that. So that's why I had to stop, is I just had so much work to do. I was handling stuff, personal and business, trying to get everything set up for this move. And we haven't even gotten to when we got up here yet. I told you this was a long story, right?